Okay, so we are recording now, just to let you know. Oh, I've pressed transcript. Oh, this is all going wrong, isn't it? I don't know how to turn transcript off. Bear with me. Oh, it's all going wrong this morning. Right, hopefully transcript is gone and we're still recording. Yes, right. Oh, it's a good start, isn't it? I'm going to start sharing now. Right, hopefully you can see my screen. Can somebody just give me a shout if you can, because I can't see anybody now.
Yeah, we can. Yes.
Brilliant. Thank you. Fantastic. So I'm going to pop it onto slideshow for you. Hooray. Right. So hopefully we are recording because I can't actually see that button either anymore. So welcome to the joint virtual SENCO briefing. We finally made it. Hooray. I didn't think at one point we were going to. There are lots this morning, so bear with me. We will try and get to any questions that you do have throughout the morning, but there are lots for you. So we do have a tight agenda, so just a couple of housekeeping kind of rules, really. It sounds a bit strict, doesn't it? They're not really rules. I guess it's really just a bit of etiquette, really. But you do obviously have the option to turn your camera off or on. And the microphone, I would just kindly ask that if you're not speaking, that you do keep your microphone off. It's just really for all of the other guests in the virtual room. There are lots of us today, so feedback obviously would be really loud if your microphone is on. So if you could just keep that off. There is a coffee break about halfway through, so I'll give you an opportunity there just to sort of stretch your legs for 10 minutes or so. And I think that's probably it. What I will do is just show you the agenda there. Towards the end of the morning, there are a couple of messages for primary colleagues. So any secondary colleagues in the room, at that point, if you did want to leave, that's absolutely fine. We've deliberately put them at the end of the morning so that obviously primary colleagues can just hear those messages only. And I think that's probably it really with housekeeping. So you've all had the agenda sent through to you and you've also had an evaluation. You can type into that evaluation in the throughout the morning if you want to make it quicker for you. Hopefully it shouldn't take you very long. So I would really appreciate it send that evaluation back to me after and gather your feedback as we always do throughout the briefing. So that's really what's happening today. The first part of the morning, we have a local area update. We have a session around the graduated approach. We have a session around the inclusion charter and commitments, quick coffee break. And then the second part of the session, we have the EPs talking around wellbeing for education recovery, mental health leads training information, and then some school updates for you. So hopefully, if she's here, I haven't seen her yet, but I'm sure she. Ah, wonderful. Thanks, Penny. This is the problem with virtual. We can't always see faces. So Penny has kindly come along today, and hopefully you all know at the moment Penny is the interim head of special educational needs and disability, and she's come along to give you all an update, really, a local area update, just for sort of 5 or 10 minutes around what's happening and what our priorities are. So I will stop sharing just for a second. Hands over to you, Penny.
Brilliant. Thank you, Lisa. And firstly, I want to say thank you to Lisa. I mean, I've looked at the agenda. Wow, what a morning. There's so much to cover. So it's really good to see you all. We at one point we hoped we could have a face-to-face session, but unfortunately we can't due to the COVID numbers. But it's really good to see you all. So this is just a very quick update from me. Firstly, I want to say thank you to you all, and just to recognise that we realise the pressures you're all under at the moment in schools. You know, dealing with so many things, still the ongoing COVID situation, which just, it, you know, I think it's ongoing, isn't it? And in some ways, with the rules changing, it's become even more complicated and difficult to manage. So I just want to say thank you and recognise that from all of us. Um, just an update, really. I mean, I can see on the agenda today, we've got the graduated approach, we've got the inclusion charter, we've got wellbeing for education recovery, whole school send, EYFS, so many things that we're covering. Just as a SEND strategic group, just to update you, we've just been setting our new priorities for the year. And the key things that we're focusing on are looking at what our data is telling us. So Hannah Daw has been working on our data scorecard for SEND, and we're really looking at what our key performance indicators are. Key things that are coming up are around exclusions or suspensions, as they now are, looking at our elective home education data. So we're looking at trying to really unpick what our data is telling us. Another thing that I would say on the data is our education, health and care data. I did have a regional meeting with our colleagues from Cornwall, Devon, Torbay and the Isles of Scilly yesterday. The numbers of requests for education, health and care plans right across the board has increased quite significantly over the last few months. The other piece of data that I did want to share with you was our tribunal data. Just out of interest, since January this year, we've had 80 requests for tribunals, and which is 2 years ago we had 16 in the whole year, so we've had 18 since 80 since January. So I think that's worth thinking about when we're having our discussion about the graduated approach as well. So what our data is telling us. Another key thing, and I think this is really pertinent for all of us, is co-production. I think probably, I mean, I've been working in Plymouth for 30 years, more so than ever. I think the importance of communication together, that we all co-produce together, that we know there's challenges, we know there's examples of things that are going really as well, but actually communication, as a problem is emerging, let's talk to each other, let's phone each other, let's talk to parents and young people really early, as soon as the problems are emerging. So communication is one of our key things that's come up on our SEND priorities. We're also thinking about inspections. So Ofsted are back visiting, I think as a local area. I think we had our last inspection in 2016, and we're thinking about self-evaluation for all of us. So, and the key things that Ofsted will be looking at with school settings and local authorities is how we identify children with SEND, how we plan and assess their needs, and how we measure outcomes for them. And I think one of the things we've identified when setting our SEND priorities is that over the last 18 months, there's really good examples of how we've been working together, how you've been identifying children with SEND virtually and face to face, and how you've been planning to meet their needs. The bit that we're struggling with, I personally feel, is what has been the impact. Really strong examples of impact and outcomes. So actually, as a SEND strategic group, we've kept our priorities the same for this year, because we're saying that, yeah, we've got really good examples, but what we've not captured yet is the outcomes and the impact. So just to let you know that. And just finally, what I wanted to share with you, you will see it in the schools bulletin. It will be coming out over the next couple of weeks. We had our budget monitoring group meeting yesterday, where we set our work plan for the coming year. And what it's been agreed is that we're going to do a full funding review. So particularly focusing on top-up funding, but we're going to be doing a full review. It's been a few years since we've done that. And I think actually there's been quite a change in senior leadership across schools and across the local authorities. So we want to be doing that together. So we're going to do looking at it, you know, as a continuum of funding. So right from the start of base funding, but particularly focusing on top-up funding. So we're going to be reviewing that. We're going to start with a large brainstorming session. So you'll see that in the school's bulletin, inviting people to an initial brainstorming session, looking at our funding review. The aim after that is that we'll have some working parties or task and finish groups. Well, we have some for the mainstream schools, APs, our support centres and our special schools. So we'll have separate task and finish groups. But I just wanted to give you the heads up. So it was only decided yesterday, but we recognise the pressures that everyone is under. And so I think it seems a pertinent time to be looking at funding. Okay. So I think that's it from me. Any immediate questions? But I hope you enjoy the rest of the morning. Any immediate questions at all? No, brilliant. Thank you for the time.
Thank you, Penny. That's fantastic. Thank you ever so much. Thank you. Okay, I would attempt to start sharing again. I don't work well with technology, as some of you know. Right, let's have a look at that one. Right, there we go. Hopefully you can all see that. Okie dokes. Right, I'm going to move swiftly on them to the SENCO guide. A couple of updates from me next. What I plan to do after the SENCO briefing, and you get all of the information afterwards, is I'm going to be sending you through a simple questionnaire. And the reason why I'm sending this through to you is because I'd like to do a review of the SENCO guide. So if I cast your minds back a couple of years ago, we put together the SENCO guide for you, and it was support really for you as a practitioner and for wider practitioners to use as well. And it's been there, believe it or not, now for a good couple of years. And over time, it's grown. We've added to it. We've changed it. We put things on temporarily, sort of during initially during COVID, took them back off again, put them in different places. And the SENCO guide's been broken down now into 15 sections. So I think it started off with about 5 sections, and then it's grown over time. And we think now, because it's used quite a lot, it's really time for a review. And we think we'd like to really gather the feedback from you, because it's really you that uses it most of the time, and really how you find that resource and if any improvements can be made, because the majority of the time it's me that updates it. It's me that adds the information. Am I putting things in the right places for you? Is the content right for you? And it does, it does involve quite a lot of work, putting things on, checking things are current, up to date. So at this point, it's a very simple questionnaire. It'll probably take about 5 minutes. It's scaling really. What I'd like to do is just send it out to you, gather your feedback, and then from there, hopefully that will inform some next steps for me. And then there'll be a question at the end, just inviting you, would you like to then perhaps form a very small working group as where we'd like to go with the SENCO guide, because it really is there for you. How would you like it to look? And that will inform our next steps. So that was really that with the SENCO guide. If you do have any questions, please pop them in the chat, or you can ask me now, and I can stop sharing. Are there any questions around the SENCO guide this morning that you'd like to ask before I move on? You can shout out because I can't see you. No, I'll take that as a no. Okay, so we'll move on to the SEND audit update. So first of all, I would like to thank all of you for being involved in this. I mean, so far 36 schools have completed their SEF already. So I would like to thank those schools, but widely I'd like to thank all of you, because at one point in the next 12 months, you will all be involved in this. So as you're all aware, because I know that most of you have seen the video, this year, so starting from April this year, and it will run right through until May next year, the SEND audit is currently through a self-evaluation approach. approach. So as I've just said, currently 36 schools have completed their SEF and they've received feedback individually from me, and then that will feed back into wider feedback in May next year. And so far, the themes emerging about that process from you indicate that you are valuing this approach so far. It's given you an opportunity to reflect upon your own good practice within your schools, and you can identify your own development points. You're also finding that it's helpful in preparation for planning, such as, for example, any upcoming visits or set inspections, for example. And it's also helping you to identify your own, perhaps your own targets as part of your own performance management. What we're also finding is if you're working within MATs, you're working together to discuss that almost as a pre-audit before you complete your own SEF. So you're kind of sharing those common approaches, you're working together. So far, on the whole, we're finding it's positive. What we will do at the next SENCO briefing, we will review it again. We might start to draw out some themes of what's coming out from that audit. And then, of course, gosh, summer briefing it will be, won't it? We will then look at the bigger evaluation, how you're finding, because at that point you all would have completed it. Then it will be the next steps. So I guess it's where you want to go with this. Would this be an annual thing? Would it be something that you want to complete every year, every 2 years? Perhaps you'd want to go back to the visits. Don't forget at that point you'd have that template completed then. So it would just be adding to it. So I guess there's lots of things for us to consider at that point in May. So I suppose at this point we are only really about a third of the way in. So it was really just really touching upon it. So far, it seems to be working well. That's the feedback that we're getting, but we will continue to review that as we go along. Don't forget, you can use your own SEF template, your own audit template if you want to. You can work within your MATs to do that. I think that's the plan that we'll be doing next with the next round of audits with one particular MAT. So does anybody have any questions around the audit process so far? Nope. You're all okay with that one? Okay, brilliant. I will keep going then. Right, fantastic. It feels a bit weird because I can't see anybody when I'm doing the slides. Right, we will move on to the graduated approach to inclusion then. So I'm just sort of glancing my eye over to my agenda because it's next to my desk here. So what we've done is we've blocked out a piece of time this morning, just having a look, so half an hour. And what we plan to do is really we want to revisit this because we don't really feel like we've given you much of an opportunity to have a look at this, to revisit it. So if you think back, we introduced or launched really the graduated approach to inclusion framework back in March 2020. If we all think about what happened in March 2020, it really was the start of the pandemic. So we kind of came along, introduced this for you, and then COVID hit. So what we did was we revisited it briefly for you in January this year, and it was more around, don't forget it's there, you can use it. And we did one of our short videos that we put on the SENCO guide for you. So what we'd like to do this morning is kind of revisit it again and spend a little chunk of time talking about that document, because we do ask you that question in the SEF. Are you using it? How do you feel about it? Have you started to use it? Are you embedding it, and so on? But you haven't really had that opportunity to talk about it. So just to cast our minds back, what's the purpose of the document? I've put the link at the bottom there. So if you're unsure where it is, there's the link. It's on the local offer. So the purpose of the document really is to meet our statutory requirements together as well as we possibly can. That's all of us. It's that single point of reference. So it's for professionals and families. Don't forget you can work this document with families to support that planning and that communication to ensure there's that consistency of practice. So we're all using that same framework. So how should the document be used? So if you remember, there's two parts to this document. So you have the planning and the assessment tools. The document should be used with families and with staff, okay? So it's all staff together to support the assess, plan, do, review cycle in your school. And it's to identify which level of support is needed. So if you think back to how the framework is used, you've got the planning right from the beginning. So you've got those universal tools, and then it works right through Okay. The document supports that multi-agency planning. So if you feel like you want to use these tools right through to that statutory assessment, you can use that as part of that as well. And then I've popped the link at the bottom there. So I'm going to move on to the next slide. I've kindly asked, and I picked this up really because Sally completed her SEF and she attached some documents as part of her SEF, and I could see that she was using or starting to use the graduated approach tools. So I kindly asked Sally, and she said, yes, I'm happy to do this. So I didn't put her on the spot. She did agree. To come along and speak really today to you all about how she's used the graduated approach tools within her school with her staff and how they've started to embed it. Because some of you might be thinking, gosh, I don't really know how to approach this, how to use it. I might be using little bits of it, but it's not fully embedded. So sometimes it's really nice to hear from another SENCO about how they went about it, which bits work, which bits perhaps didn't quite work. They're trialing that a bit more. So hopefully Sally is here, and she's given me some slides which I've put into the slides today. Sally, are you here? Are you ready? Brilliant, thanks. So what I'll do is I'll move your slides on for you, Sally, and I will let you do the talking. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's great. Thank you very much, Lisa.
Okay. Right,
okay,
there you
so
go.
thank you, Lisa. So when I was thinking about actually what to share with you today, first and foremost, just hello to everybody who knows me. If you don't know me, I'm a SENCO for the Inspire Motor Academy Trust, and I work across 2 primary schools. And they're very different primary schools. One is Anisetta Community School, which has systems that are embedded. The other school is Torbridge Primary School, where we are developing at the moment. So I'm looking at this from 2 different viewpoints as well, but the graduated approach, we kind of have now got into a place where it's kind of starting to work for us, but it's taken us a while. So really we started to look at this last year, and I started to ask staff to use this when we were communicating with parents, when we were reflecting on SEN. And I think really over the course of a few terms, the reflections and the feedback from staff and from myself, that we felt actually it was a really tricky document to use in practice. From a SENCO perspective, it's great. There's lots of information within the documents that work really, really well. But from a teacher's perspective, they were finding it too tricky to use. So actually, we felt that I needed to review the document and to see how it could effectively be implemented in school. So I started off then really by adapting the documents, because actually they're there, but actually we felt it kind of needed to be chunked down into smaller, more manageable parts for our staff to use as well. Sorry, excuse me. And then really start to think about how this then would look within the systems we already have in place in school. So the next couple of slides kind of just show really how we are using that universal language of targeted provision, universal provision and specialist provision, and all school staff have had training so they are aware of this common language. And actually our universal provision, what does this actually look like in our school? Where does the graduated approach paperwork fit into this as well? And I think something we found really useful was that assessment part to the graduated approach, and that fits really nicely into that universal provision and what we're doing in school for that, the checklist, that assessment overview, working with parents so we can have that communication with parents. The assessment part of it for us works really, really well. And again, I think the most important thing for staff and for myself as well, because it's about time management and workload, we've actually said, where we've chunked it down into areas of need, we are not necessarily doing all of it at once. We're kind of focusing what a main area of need might be, because staff have found that more manageable, and then we're saving the documents to a secure central location, so then we can build on this. So it might be myself one time, it might be the class teacher another time, we might add parents' feedback into it, but then if staff change over the course of time, they're not having to start again. We can actually just build on top of what we've already done as well. So the assessment side worked really well, and that fits into our universal provision. When we move on to targeted and specialist provision in school, this is where staff found it really tricky to use the local authority documents, because it's quite, that planning document is really quite hefty, and when we were using it, staff were getting quite confused as to what section they needed to be looking at. Sometimes they felt they were repeating information as well, and feedback from staff where we've chunked it down, so we've done it under cognition, learning, communication, interaction, and so on. So I'm directing staff and we're having conversations about actually what area do we need to focus on, and then we've got that running throughout our targeted and our specialist provision levels of support, and that, I think for staff, that's the most important thing that they're finding is working really well, not to have to engage with the whole document in one go, but to be doing little bits at different times. We also needed to reflect and say, actually, you don't need to be doing this for every single SEN child all in one go. Some staff felt this is a lot to be doing for all of our SEN children, but over the course of the last year, where we've started to introduce it, it's growing and it's developing, and we're not going backwards to do anything. If we've got a child already SEN, we're not going back to that assessment part of it. We're just using the planning side of things, and then that's now feeding into our TAMs, and if we're putting referrals into CAMS or other agencies as well, so that works really well. I think my last slide, just to share the positives that I feel from engaging with the process, it's been a really good opportunity just to reflect on the school systems for identifying needs and any barriers to learning as well. And for me, ensuring a consistent approach of all our staff. Probably like lots of your schools, you get new staff in September. So then you have a mixture of staff who might have had previous training, staff who actually are new as well. So actually ensuring there's that consistent language being used, the consistent systems work really well. Particularly, I found it really useful for children who are not on a SEN register, and identifying the needs as well, and using the document for communicating with parents. At the moment, post-COVID, I'm getting quite a lot of parents who feel their child has a significant SEN need, but actually from using the document, it helps steer that conversation around to actually what are we seeing, what are the barriers to learning as well. So for me, it's the assessment side of it is a really useful document to be using with staff, with parents and carers too. And the message that I always share with staff every single year, these documents, the checklist, the planning checklist and documents, really does empower the staff to think about actually what are they doing to support the SEN children in their classes. I always share the message of all teachers are teachers of SEN. That's really established in our settings, but quite often I'm asked questions of what could we do, but actually with these documents, it gives them the power to have a look through and reflect on what they've already done and what we could possibly do next. So yeah, and it is an ongoing process. It's working well for us currently. It's by no means perfect. Quite recently, I think I've reflected again to think how can this now feed into our TAM meetings? How can we adapt it from what I expected staff to do before a TAM meeting previously to now using the graduated approach paperwork? So it's an ongoing development, but yeah, it's working really well. And my next step is next term I've got some training booked in with our parents and carers, just so they begin to understand the levels of support in school as well. So yeah, I have found it really positive to engage with, but you do need to dedicate a little bit of time to really kind of get your head around it and think, how can this work for me in my school within our current systems? What might we need to adapt and change? And yeah, when it becomes part of your school system, it is working very well. Thank you, Lisa.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Sally. That's really helpful. So what we'd like to do now, just based on the things that Sally's really been saying, want to really think about your own practice and where you are with the graduated approach. So in a second, the lovely Fiona, hopefully in a second, she's going to break you all off into some breakout rooms. That's all of us. That's me as well. And there's some questions really I'd like you to discuss just for about sort of 10-15 minutes. And it's, have you managed to use the framework at all? And if you have you used it with staff as part of your assess, plan, do, review cycle? And have you managed to use that framework in co-production with families, again, as part of your APDR? And does the framework form part of any of your outcomes-based planning at all if you're considering a statutory request? So if you think about your TAM process as part of that statutory request, are you starting to feed in any of that paperwork at all from that framework? So thinking about those three questions, they are on your evaluation if you do forget them. Even if you get as far as just discussing the first one, it's not a problem. It's really just an opportunity for you just to go away, consider those questions, and really just have a chat about the graduated approach and really how far you are with it. So I'm just going to stop sharing just for a second. Okay. I'm going to stop recording as well now because we don't want to record the breakout rooms, but we will record the discussion when we come back together from the breakout rooms, okay? So I'm going to stop recording just for a second.